It's 1832. There's 16 million people living in Britain. Britain is at the heights of its empire, but back in England, an aging man's bones ache, and he has finally had enough. He knows that he needs to change his life, but being born in a working class social standard, he has very little chance in doing that. 97.5% of the British population have no voting rights. Even though Britain is a democratic monarchy, only 400,000 men born into the landed gentry and nobility have the right to vote for a member of parliament. But the fed up and exhausted population have decided the system is broken, and they will force through political change, no matter what. Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm of course the Knight of History, and this is part number 4 of a 5-part series on the Age of Reformation. This time we're going to be talking about the political change that paved the way for modern democracy. So please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Now let's get into this. Most voters who had a say in politics were wealthy property owners and were all male. But due to the fact that Britain's electoral system had been evolving since the medieval period, the rights to vote varied enormously across the country. Therefore, there were things called rotten boroughs, where just one family or a landowner had the power to choose an MP, Member of Parliament, for that area. The most notorious rotten borough was a place called Old Sarum, which was once a thriving market town, but had been uninhabited hillside since the 17th century. Nevertheless, a group of local landowners still got to choose 2 Old Sarum MPs for Parliament to represent them. In complete contradiction to there's a place where nobody lives, many of Britain's growing industrial cities didn't have any representation in Parliament. They weren't given it. Birmingham, Manchester, Sheffield, Leeds, 4 of the largest cities in Britain didn't have one MP between them. In boroughs where a large number of people had the right to vote, candidates would often spend fortunes buying voters' supports with bribes of food and alcohol. In addition to this, there was no secret balloting, meaning voters could place votes in public but not in private. So landowners would and could intimidate their tenants to vote in a certain way. This of course leads to a messy and corrupt political system, meaning that Parliament did not serve the interests of the common people. Power therefore remained firmly in the hands of the aristocrats. But people were getting tired of this. In fact, in 1819, 60,000 people gathered in St. Peter's Field in Manchester to listen to a well-known politician. And of course he was a radical politician for that time, Henry Hunt. However, only 10 minutes into his speech, the local yeoman cavalry charged into the crowds with their swords drawn. Their attacks killed 11 and injured another 500 people. Just after the Battle of Waterloo with Napoleon's massacres, this event became known as Peterloo Massacre. Inspired by both the American and French revolutions, political radicals in Britain campaigned for the end to corruption and an aristocratic government. Radicals gained support from the middle class and also from the British growing working class. In 1831, a Whig politician called Earl Grey became the Prime Minister. Although he was an aristocrat, Grey was a long-time supporter of political reform. His government proposed to extend the vote to every single man living in a property worth £10 or more, and to abolish 60 of Britain's smallest boroughs, redistributing their MPs to industrial regions instead of these empty boroughs. Earl Grey's reforms were actually accepted in the House of Commons, but they were rejected in the House of Lords. Earl Grey resigned. He had had enough, and the people of Britain were furious. Riots erupted across the country, and an angry mob even burned down a castle belonging to the Duke of Newcastle. In Birmingham, a radical named Thomas Attwood promised that he would raise an army of 100,000 men to march on London. Because things were getting so serious, the House of Lords quickly changed their mind, fancy that, and the Earl Grey's reforms, the Great Reform Act, passed in 1832. This act was a landmark in British history, but many people believed it didn't go far enough. It only increased the British electorate, people who can actually vote, to 650,000 people, all taken from the wealthy middle class. So in 1838, a group of working class radicals led by a person called William Lovett, a London cabinet maker, wrote the Charters Act containing 6 demands for even further political reforms. They were universal male suffrage, all males get to vote, equal electoral districts, removal of property qualifications for MPs, the payment of MPs, a secret ballot, and annual elections. These demands seem rather normal to us today, but back then they were extraordinarily radical, and people who supported these demands became known as Charterists. But Britain actually went into a harsh economic depression during the 1840s, so support for the Charterists grew. They were able to present repeated petitions to Parliament, not signed by a few thousand people, but by millions of working class people. But Britain refused to debate their demands, full stop rejecting them. In 1848, the Chartists actually held their largest meeting in Kennington Common in South London, where 50,000 people gathered, but they were unable to achieve their goals. Nonetheless, Lovett and his ideas had significantly impacted British Parliament and British politics. By 1918, all but one of the demands, the annual elections of the People's Charter, had been achieved. Campaigns for political reform returned during the 1860s. In Parliament, members of the Liberal Party were its strongest supporters. However, in 1867, a Conservative, not a Liberal, Prime Minister called Benjamin Disraeli cleverly decided to adopt the Liberal policies. Disraeli's Second Reform Act gave 1 million more men the right to vote, earning a huge boost in support for the Conservative Party. The leader of the Liberal Party, the person who actually came up with these reforms, William Gladstone, was furious that Disraeli had stolen his policies. Gladstone was a giant in Victorian politics. He served Parliament for over 60 years and was Prime Minister on 4 separate occasions. In 1884, Gladstone finally got the last laugh when he achieved his own reform, passing the Third Reform Act, extending the vote to all male homeowners, around 2 in 4 of Britain's male population. It would, however, take another 50 years when in 1928, through numerous militant uprisings, women in Britain were finally given the right to vote on the same basis as men, where women were forced into taking drastic measures, fighting and brawling with the police to change the laws. But the 19th century was a really lawless place in Britain. Find out in the 5th and final part of the series how Britain brought law and order to their nation. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. The more you know.